Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1975 film Death Race 2000, and as it says here, it's a Roger Corman classic. Really enjoy Roger Corman films. They usually are kind of cheesy, kind of campy, but always fun. This film is no exception. I love this film, big fan. I just recently bought the DVD, wanted the Blu-ray, but that was a pretty limited release, and it is very expensive to get online now, so I went with this, which was still factory sealed and only cost me like 10 bucks before shipping. So I think all in all it was like, I don't know, $12, $15, something like that. Well worth owning, in my opinion. Love this film. So yeah, let's get into it. Death Race 2000, directed by Paul Bartel, who also did Eating Raoul, which I have a review for on my channel, Cannonball, Lust in the Dust, and Private Parts, not the Howard Stern one, just to name a few films. Interesting note on Paul Bartel. Paul Bartel actually died in 2000. So the fact that he directed Death Race 2000 and died in 2000, kind of weird. Written by Robert Thom, who also wrote scripts for All the Fine Young Cannibals, The Subterraneans, Bloody Mama, and The Witch Who Came from the Sea, which I've seen The Witch Who Came from the Sea. Very weird movie. I think it's still on Shudder at the moment if you want to check it out. But trust me, very weird movie. I haven't reviewed it or anything, but it's odd. Also involved in the script, Charles B. Griffith, who wrote the script for Attack of the Crab Monsters, which I know John, the movie detective, is a big fan of that one, I do believe. I haven't seen that film yet, but I really want to. Heard good things. I heard it's ridiculous. Also wrote The Undead, A Bucket of Blood, yes, the Herschel Gordon Lewis, Beast from Haunted Cave, The Little Shop of Horrors, everyone knows that one, the original, Creature from the Haunted Sea, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hype. Hype. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hype. That sounds weird. And it's based on the story by Ib Melchior, who also had script credits for Godzilla Raids Again, Gigantus the Fire Monster, Reptilicus, and Planet of the Vampires, which is a Mario Bava film I've heard I would like, and it's crazy, and I do plan on watching it. Kino Lorber has a Planet of the Vampires Blu-ray coming out, like special edition Blu-ray coming out soon that I think I'm going to end up buying. Anyway, David Carradine is in this as the titular character of, well, not titular, as the main character of Frankenstein. He took the role of Frankenstein because he had just quit the show Kung Fu, which had gone on for a while. He kind of wanted to change his image and he wanted to get his career started up again. This is kind of according to him. So he went ahead and took the role of Frankenstein in Death Race 2000. Reportedly, it was Peter Fonda who they initially wanted to play the role of Frankenstein, but he turned it down because he said it's too ridiculous. Obviously not a problem for David Carradine. Yes, this is a ridiculous film, but look, it was the 70s. Consider what the film landscape was like in the 70s. There was a lot of ridiculous stuff. I mean, that was prime time for drive-in theaters, and there were so many films that just went directly to drive-ins. It was all about ridiculousness. So, Fonda, were you aware of what was going on at the time? Carradine and Stallone actually apparently did a lot of their own driving in the film. And on that note, I had read somewhere that they apparently had a lot of problems with the cars, which sounds like it was a real big pain in the butt. So much so that for certain scenes, that they were kind of like quick take ones, not any of those, long ones where they're riding down the road. Some of those scenes, they actually had to have the cast and crew push a car that wasn't working. Roger Corman wrote the original treatment for the script, but when he did it in a more serious manner. And so when it actually had like the full script writing, he wanted to kind of go more comedic because he felt like it would kind of work best that way, which I think is a good idea. I mean, with all the comedy to it, it's playing in two ways because you still have all the kind of serious kind of social ills that are hinted at, which I think a lot of it is kind of steeped in kind of like a mistrust of government feeling throughout the film, which was very much a thing at the time when this film came out because Vietnam had just been done with, I believe. And yeah, it's, around that time, a lot of mistrust with the government. And obviously that happens in many, many, many decades, but there are certain things that, world events or, U.S. events that kind of like make that flare up even more. So I think that this film really does reflect that to a great degree. Are the car drawings in the very beginning of this before the title trying to say something about pollution, maybe? Because there is a part where it's like showing the car, then it's showing the car with like a dead person in the reflection of the hubcap, and then it's showing the car with like all this like chemistry stuff inside and showing exhaust coming out with a skull on the hubcap. So I don't know if that was trying to say that like society is killing itself or killing the planet. I don't know. I don't think so, but it could be kind of viewed that way. That's just how it occurred to me. But the grand celebration in the beginning of this film establishes how beloved this messed up event actually is. It kind of gives you an idea that it is tradition, this has been going on for quite some time. So I think it's important that they kind of set it up that way with all the fanfare and everyone cheering and everyone totally into it. And it is interesting that you don't fully understand what it is until a bit into the film. Like you think, oh, it's a race, and you have all these weird, quirky characters that are going to be involved in this race. When I watch this film, it also makes me think of the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, The Running Man, which I feel like potentially The Running Man borrowed some stuff from Death Race 2000. Just saying. But yeah, I like that beginning. Bartel plays a character in this. The director, he's the guy who wheels Frankenstein out in the beginning, who's on the gurney, and kind of presents him as, here's the new and improved Frankenstein, which much later on in the film, you get the idea from the guy who is Frankenstein at that point, David Carradine's character, that they have kind of manufactured Frankenstein to a degree, that it's not always necessarily been the same person as Frankenstein throughout time. He's got this kind of like immortal appeal, and when someone who's Frankenstein dies, they kind of cover that up, and then they usher someone else in who's basically been government bred, well, not necessarily bred, but government groomed to take over the mantle of Frankenstein. And they just happen to get to a point where this individual iteration of Frankenstein has kind of had it and wants to do away with everything. But we don't know that in the very beginning of the film. All the character introductions are super fun. Each kind of has their own jokes that they end up telling and their own kind of ridiculousness to their character, which obviously is a very big part of the comedic aspect of the film, which I think works extremely well and is one of the most fun aspects of it. In addition to all the fun kind of driving and kill scenes and that helicopter scene. I will get to that. The questions Frankenstein gets about where the president is and how he's doing shows how popular he is and what his connections are like, which will end up being important later. Now, it kind of seemed in the beginning like he has a personal relationship with the president, and I think there were kind of like, hints of that throughout the film. But then it's weird because later on he says that he has to win the race because that's the only way he'll get to meet the president. So I think maybe it's been like he has met him before because he's won races before, but this time is different because it happens to be this iteration of Frankenstein and he has his hand grenade, which I thought was hilarious. It makes me chuckle every time I see it. I love that hand grenade thing. It looks ridiculous. The announcement of the race saying it was started after the world crash of 1979 gives the idea that this is kind of like gladiatorial events during the time of Rome, really to keep the masses entertained and passive. Because as long as people are focused on something they can get excited about and kind of pour their attention into, it makes them less apt to kind of question the government and get into more political type things. Obviously, that's not 100% in this film because you have this whole resistance, or as they call them, the rebels, within the context of the film, who have no interest in the games. They think they're unbelievably brutal. I mean, they're basically the conscience, the actual like ethical conscience of the people in America who are kind of still tied to the old America because they're still flying the old original American flag. And you see that this new regime, since the crash of 79, is flying this kind of bastardized, totally different version of the flag to kind of show that it's now authoritarian. It's totally different. So it's kind of the bad side versus the rebels being the good side. And it's very easily seen with the use of those flags. So kind of smart. The introduction of the resistance gives you an idea that this is an anti-authority film, which makes sense since the Vietnam War had just ended at this point, obviously, which I kind of already talked about. It's a shock to viewers when they find out that killing is actually involved in this race because, like I said, initially you think, oh, it's just a race with wacky characters, including Sylvester Stallone and Mary Woronov. Woronov. Yes, I think that's the best way to say it. My apologies if I'm messing up. Frankenstein revealing his face to look basically fine when it looks like, when he has his mask on, there's like, burns around the bottom of his one eye. It kind of sends the message that he's not really who he appears, that there's kind of something different underneath the mask, which is foreshadowing that he's not the same, Frankenstein of old, of rah-rah, authoritarian government, and he's got his own motives. He has a very cool, calm, blank exterior, but internally, he's got his own thing going on. He's got his own plot. And he's not necessarily working with the resistance at this point, but they're working toward the same goal. So, but you don't know that until much later. Even though it's quick, Calamity Jane goring the guy dressed as a matador is a pretty good gore moment. It's like a quick flash, but you actually do see like the horn going through something that looked like that person with blood coming out the other end. So it looked cool, even though it was really quick. I assume they had to do it as a really quick shot in order for it to look good, because sometimes when the practical effects are not great, you can make them look fine by not showing them for too long. Don't let the person's eye focus too much, because then they'll see all the issues. I love how the hospital scene, they just roll the old people into the middle of the road, and then Frankenstein actually swerves in order to take out all the people that he deems morally reprehensible for actually doing that, for putting those old people out there to be fodder for the race and for scoring. So yeah, that's a cool moment. And he kind of like goes around the side, and then you see all these people kind of like fly up one after the other as it's insinuated they're getting rammed by Frankenstein's car. You gotta love the dynamite baby trick that the Resistance does. Sorry, I gotta adjust my seating here. The whole one where I think it was Nero the hero, played by Martin Kove, by the way, which I didn't know that was him until this last time I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Martin Kove. So, yeah, the dynamite baby, hilarious, good joke. Obviously, it's fallen for. That's a fun moment. A lot of fun moments in this film. The head crush that's done by Machine Gun Joe looks good. It's also a funny scene with the guy's coworker who basically gives the thumbs down. Like, Machine Gun Joe, Sylvester Stallone, defers to this guy and is literally like, should I let him go? And the guy's just like, he's like, kill my coworker. I know people probably feel like that, but it's a messed up scene for sure. But it does imbue that kind of like dark humor at the same time. When Frankenstein's fan says that scoring isn't killing, it shows how morally gone society is in this kind of dystopian future. There are a lot of those kind of hints that happen, but once she actually says like, oh, scoring isn't killing, it kind of hits the audience as kind of like, oh man, like people legitimately in the society think that this is totally fine. Like, for the purpose of the race, it's not actually killing, which this kind of echoes, or The Purge nowadays kind of echoes stuff like Death Race 2000. So, yeah, it comes back in cycles. It's funny when Frankenstein accidentally kills the deacon. I thought that was funny when he dropped his glove and then circles around for it and just takes the deacon out. That was just, he could have ended up exposing himself at that point somewhat, but people kind of wrote it off as, oh no, it's a mistake. So I guess he fooled people enough when he dropped his glove and then came back and was just like, well, whatever. And they're like, oh no, it was an accident. But then again, it's a government-controlled event, so anything that looks bad in any sort of light, they dress it up to be something else, obviously. Like, I think it was the part with Matilda the Hun, where she dies, and they were about to say it in the broadcast, and then they're like, she scored. Never mind, she scored. And then later on, they do find out that she was actually killed, and then I think that's when they were saying it's the French army, like the French are getting involved. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And on that, this is actually where I am with it. Matilda the Hun, I love that she falls for that fake tunnel trick. That's the old Wile E. Coyote tunnel trick that he would play on the Roadrunner, and then I think he would end up falling for it himself, basically. But yeah, it's that kind of trick. So I'm kind of wondering if that trick was inspired by those old cartoons. I remember watching those when I was young, but that's how it struck me. I'm like, oh, the Wile E. Coyote trick. You see the typical misdirection of an authoritarian government when they deny the rebels exist and say it's the French sabotaging the race. This is meant to galvanize the people against another country instead of knowing that there's actually dissent within their own country. Now, this is actually something that a lot of people in power have done in the past and continue to do, where they try to get someone to focus on the other. You know, they want to brand a group of people or a whole other country or whatever as the main issue with what, you know, protecting your way of life at this point. And in this instance, it has to do with this game or this event that people love so much. It's become such a big deal. So when they say, oh, it's the French, it's taking the focus away from the fact that there is actually dissent within the country and placing it outside and saying, this is your enemy over here. Pay attention over here. Don't look over here, which is what is actually going on. And this is used a lot, where politicians in particular will kind of try to villainize a group of people or a country just to get people riled up and have them focus on that instead of focusing on what's actually important. You find out just how bad Joe is when he scores his own pit crew. That is kind of a funny moment where they're just like, he scored his own pit crew. And no one thinks it's a problem, that like he should have been somewhat loyal to these people because literally it's his pit crew who have been taking care of his car, which then begs the question, who's going to take care of his car now? I guess he will do it. I don't know. Or his assistant as well. I don't know. But that's just that next level of showing like how cutthroat, how bloodthirsty, and how disconnected, like how much of a sociopath he is. So he's perfect for these games, basically, because he just does not care. They shot the plane scene in a pretty exciting way. I really love that whole plane scene where the resistance is coming after Frankenstein in the car. And yeah, I mean, it just looks really good. Like, it's exciting, it's fast-paced. And that speaks to another thing with this film in general, is that the pacing is great. I don't think at any point in the film did I feel like it was getting too stagnant. I mean, there are moments where it does slow down, but it's not for very long, and certainly not to the point where you start to feel like it's getting stagnant at all. This film moves, and I love that. I like how the commentator says Frankenstein took out the French Air Force after that whole plane scene, because it is one plane. And I'm assuming that everyone's seeing this. You don't get the idea that this is all just over the radio. You get the idea that this is televised, that people are seeing this stuff. So people seeing one plane and then them being like, Frankenstein took out the whole French Air Force. It's just kind of crazy. Like, people would fall for that? I don't think so. But, you know, this is a ridiculous movie, so it fits in. The whole hand grenade gag is ridiculous. But that moment is the shocking reveal of Frankenstein's secret assassination plot. It was all building towards this, where we find out, oh, this whole time, Frankenstein was seeming very unfeeling and like he was going along with all the fanfare of this and, falling in line with what the government wants. And in the end, he had his own individual plot to take out the president, which apparently if you just take out the president, then whoever takes him out is the next ruler. I mean, King of the Hill rules for the presidency, I guess. Solid trick that Frankenstein and Annie play at the end, but pretty messed up that Thomasina Paine, the head of the resistance, ends up shooting her own daughter unknowingly. That was messed up. At first, obviously, you think it was Frankenstein who she shot because you just see Frankenstein from the back and then meeting the president, and then you see when, she falls over that it was actually Annie and Frankenstein is there, and then he takes out the stand where everyone is and takes out the president, and then Frankenstein's the new president. Frankenstein becomes president and changes society to be peaceful just by abolishing the race. That's kind of the idea that they give you, is that once he abolishes the race, everything is fixed. Although it could also just be seen as that just is the symbolic first move. And then obviously he starts integrating the resistance into the government, and it gives you the idea that where the film leaves you, things are back on track to get back to an America that was before this whole ordeal. So it's a hopeful ending. To keep things light, they don't just use jokes, but a light and it's sometimes zany score. Just notice that score is pretty solid, and it's very upbeat, it's very light, it's very zany, which I think helps with the kind of fun, light vibe to the whole film, so it works. Note how Machine Gun Joe and Frankenstein are opposites. Joe is always angry and yelling, and Frankenstein is always calm and emotionless. That's just one way to kind of show the polar opposites, to show that this is the main good guy, this is the main bad guy, at least within the context of the race here, because obviously the big bad guy is the president within all of this, because he's kind of controlling all that stuff and making it continue. But within the context of the race, you know, how over the top and angry Sylvester Stallone is as Machine Gun Joe. Yeah. Which I think that my favorite part for Stallone in that film was the dinner scene where they're all kind of getting angry about the fact that a bunch of the other racers have been taken out by the resistance, and they're talking to, I guess, the representative from the government about it. Like, Stallone's performance in that is my favorite within the film. Like, he does an excellent job. I will say, on that note, David Carradine's performance, I mean, I understand he's supposed to be, like, calm and emotionless the whole time, but come on, man. Like, it looked like he was phoning it in for the most part. It was not great. But Sylvester Stallone and Mary Woronov, the best. They were the two best actors in that film. They were my favorite characters. I love them. They were great. Wanted to see more of them on the screen. Really did. So, yeah. Well, that's it. That's all I have to say about Death Race 2000. Been wanting to get to this one for quite some time because I'm a fan of it, and I will be watching this again probably in October just because it's that fun. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a very solid 4-star rating. This is a fun, good film. It works on 2 levels, just a ridiculous, over-the-top dark comedy, or a satirical piece about authoritarianism in the United States and just mistrust of government. So, let me know your opinions about this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Like it, hate it, in between, and just give me a few sentences telling me why. 1 or 2 sentences telling me what you do or don't like, or if you want to go further, that's fine. Do me a favor, hit subscribe if you haven't for my channel yet. It really does mean a lot to me. It is your best way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done, because I'm not making money doing it at this point. I'm just doing this to, you know, create content, get my creative juices flowing, and, you know, start some conversations online about horror in a very nerdy way, because that's what I like to do. But consider subscribing, because it's quick, painless, and costs you no money. And hit the notification bell button as well, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 4 a week at this point. Regardless, though, thanks for taking your time to watch this particular video, and until next time, keep it brutal.